Well, so this is Baruch, and we're back once again on the Parshat Noach. And over here we are looking to see the translation of the words in Aramaic, which is the words of the Zohar itself. And then we have a wonderful pirush called the Matok Medavash, sweeter than honey. So I'm going to try first to translate the words of the Zohar. And since I'm doing this, and I'm working on it because I have to get the words right, so I do the best I can. It's also for the benefit of the listener, because it's a wonderful thing to be able to repeat this. Now, the teachers that I had many times ago went for mantras a lot. And one of the things you could do with the Zohar, if you could get a handle on just the kind of the way the language works, just say it without really understanding it has a tremendous, tremendous benefit. On the other hand, if you can translate it and read it and also go around it, say it again, this is an even higher level. So let's see what the Zohar says and see if we could translate it. Then we'll look at the Matok Medavash and get as much help as we can. So a little background on this is that the first mitzvah of the Torah is Peru Urevu, Miloah Amalas Aretz, and fill up the world. So you have to reproduce and multiply. In this Zohar, the beginning of the Zohar that we're talking about, we get a little bit of an understanding of modern day dilemmas. For example, if you said that homosexuality, well, everybody should be able to do it. But what about pedestry? What about having sex with 5-year-olds or 3-year-olds? Isn't that a natural thing too? Couldn't we do that and have that as a part of our culture? So here we are, some answers as to what's the problem. So why should there be a problem with these things? We say that what you could do to children, but that's a lot of homosexuality starts when people are children and they're fondled or messed around with by people who are older. Don't be fooled by the ideas that these things are genetic in some way, and as a result of that, you can't do anything about it. Now let's see, that's the first part of this Zohar. Let's see what the Zohar says. Am Rabbi Shimon lislok mila ba'alma dekucha berichu kane law kamo chova de Bris. So let's translate it. Rabbi Shimon said, Lislach Mila, there's nothing in this world, Ba'alma, in this world, the Kucha Barichu Kane law that a Kodesh Baruch Hu is jealous about, wants to protect at all costs, Kamo Chova de Bris, like the guilt that happens when a person misuses his bris. Now this is a nice way of saying, talking about sexual immorality, and there are all different kinds. So Hakama Da'at Omer, like you say like this, Cherev no kemes nakam bris. There is a cherev, that is a sword, the sword of vengeance. It takes the vengeance for the bris. So we're saying here, now he's going to go into the generation of the flood, and he's going to talk about what they were like. V'talchazin, come and see, lo ishtalim chova dedara de tufana, was not actually sealed. The ishtalim means completed, the guilt of the generation of the flood. They made a sin. What was their sin? Their big mistake, the big thing that they did, was that they spilt their seed on the ground. So it either means that they engaged in what we consider to be illegitimate behavior, men and men sex, sex with animals, sex with children, all different kinds of things like this. These are all wastings of seeds, because why? The main mitzvah is to Peru Urevu Umilos Haaretz, and fill up the world. You're not going to do that, and even though we have all different kinds of philosophies that want to tell us in our rich state, because the United States is a very rich place, that we can ignore that because it doesn't really matter. Everybody's got a right to do whatever they want, unless what? So it's even though they were violent to each other, they were killing each other, that the world was full of violence. Now just think about certain areas in the United States today. Places where these philosophies, where the sexual behavior is totally, totally out of control. Violence follows right along with it. And it writes like this, he says, V'chamos Mikola Hava. So Chamos, he wants to say that Hamas, this is the word for our enemies right now. Hamas means violence in Hebrew. Uksiv, and it's written like this, Ki almala ha'aretz chamas b'fneihem, that the world, in their presence, in other words, before God, and the court, the upper court, the word was full of violence. But even with that, they were spilling their seeds in the presence of the great judge, which is the word Elokim. So they were destroying everything. They were destroying their future. So when you don't have proper relations, what happens is you have no children. Homosexuals can't reproduce. Oh, well, maybe you could find a way, but no, actually they can't. So reproduction is a basic human need. And one thing you could think like this, we're not at a time of war that is threatening us, but wars can wipe out a tremendous population in a very, very quick time, especially now. So we need as many people, as many Jewish people, to be able to reproduce as possible. So what the destruction they did when they spilt their seed on the ground, when they did all kinds of sexual affairs that did not lead to poru or revu, reproduce and multiply. So now there's another way of thinking about this, different way. That's the way to say it like this, is that the generation of the flood was destroyed as a result of sexual affairs, the libidinal overwhelming. But we said another thing, is that this same thing, just try to think about the murder rates in the United States and thinking about the former slave culture in the United States, which was really a dependent culture on their masters. Slaves ate. Slaves were fed. Slaves had lots of extra time, and they were also motivated to reproduce. And they reproduced with anybody. Nobody cared because that was the nature of the slavery. It was such a terrible thing. But we still have it today in the form of welfare. Same ideas. Is that the women reproduce. It doesn't, as many men as they can, let's just say as many men. But the families are very, very weak. And as a result of that, very few males in the families. So this is what happens. What happens when the males don't engage in the proper relationships with women, it winds up that the women become, abandoned. They do what they need to do. So that's our culture right now, a part of our culture, and goes along with it a tremendous, because, say, for example, I have this woman that I like, and she's busy with some other guy. This could make you really, really angry. And that's what happens, especially when you combine it with drugs and drink. Those things all together, which is a plague for poor people in this country, it becomes very, very serious and leads to what he's about to say now. But actually, their case, that in other words, when they reach the ultimate level of judgment, that they would be destroyed because of the guilt, or the sin, that's right, chova, the sin of Hamas, which is violence. They started killing each other. They used to rob each other. They robbed each other. They stole from each other. They stole their women. They stole their children. They took whatever they wanted. They didn't want to the other. So now he says this idea right here. Tochazi. So come and see. This pacto al kale de ina de maser dina al chavrechem. So there are many, many voices. He's referring to voices which are bringing this message to the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, all the way up to the upper place, which is called the Avzag, the Ak, in Kabbalah. He said, "There is pacto al kale de ina de maser dina al chavrechem." No, a person who turns or gives his friend over to the government or something like that to be punished. Amad the Ovid loan, because this person did something bad to them, and so therefore they're going to get back to them. And this is written, because of them, that their whole world was full of violence. You had to be constantly on the lookout. Imagine all the situations that you have in certain neighborhoods where the violence is right next door to you, all around you, and especially at night. Again, Kachel says, for this reason it's written, as the aretz, so they are destroying the land. Now, there are secrets in these words, and the Matak B'Devash is going to try to tell us what it is. So we'll read the first part. I'm a Rebbe Shimon. So he says, Ein l'cha, I'll switch to the light print now. Ein l'cha davar ba'olam she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu mekanal alav, that a person is jealous about. In other words, you take this away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is he talking about? The covenant, the bris. That when children get married, your children get married, they're virgins. They've kept the bris. They haven't been out sporting around with people of the other sex or people of their own sex. Just sporting around. Give it a try. But people who are religious don't do that. They protect their bris. They make sure that their family is whole. It says, "Ba'olam shal kodesh baruch hu mekanav alav kamo avon abris," like wasting your seed. And that means, as I said before, this could be anything from masturbation to there is something called a nocturnal emission that happens during sleep by people, by men. That's another category. Then you get the homosexuality, and then you get the sexuality with animals or sexuality with children. These are all things which are very bad, and they lead to destruction. Instead, as we said before, the main rule is you have to be fruitful and multiply and fill up the world with people. So it says, Hare, Shabashash Anakama, at the time that there will be vengeance, His gerak es bris, the main thing, the first thing only that Hashem, that is the court, the heavenly court, decides. Ela shar haveros, he says that the bris is more below shar haveros. There are many sins, many different ways, but the sin of the bris is the biggest one. Then Matuk B'Devash, let's go back down and a little more reading. Ba'avarei, come and see. Shlo nishlam avon derech hamabel. So the avon of he says, door, read it wrong, or avon dor hamabel, that the din that was to be performed on the generation of the flood was only completed. V'lo nismalam sasam, its full measure was not filled. Ela b'shvil shehishchisa darkom al haaretz, that they took their seed and wasted it. Darcham, that is their way upon the earth. Now, the earth is another words for malchus. Now, you have to think about this. When men are off the derech, they are neglecting their women. When you look at another woman, you're neglecting your own wife. If you get involved with other women, then you're destroying your family. So he said, Va'af al gav, the hava makafche dor the door. Even though they actually were committing violence against each other. It wasn't just that they had sexual affairs, but they were also beating itself up, killing each other, and like that. So it's very interesting that our enemy today, in the year 2026, of the current counting cycle, is Hamas, who's extremely violent. That's their name. We didn't name them Hamas. They named themselves Hamas. Hamas means violence. And it's written like this, Ki mala ha'aretz chamos, the whole world is full of violence because of them. Then it said, Mikol Makam, in any case, Im kol timsa shekasa v'tishachet ha'aretz elokim, that even so, when we start thinking about what is really bad about them, it's the hashchasim, which means the destruction of their seed, that God gave to them. Hine mashchisim, they are destroying their seed. Shehem beis lashonos zeh keneged zeh. So there's two different languages. Teshachetz haaretz, which means the aretz was destroyed, or destroying the land. Who's the land? Malchus. Remember again, when men go off the path, they start wasting their seed. What's happening to the women? They're not getting married. They're not reproducing. The world is not growing in the terms of goodness. They're destroying. Shehem beis lashonos keneged zeh keneged zeh lomer she'ha'onesh al hineni mashkisim choi, that the real punishment, or there was a great punishment, about the sexual aveiros. So then he says, she'nishchasa b'shvil hachet, they were destroyed because of this sin. Let me see if I can get a better focus here. Al hashchasa zara, that they spilled their seed. They wasted their seed. They got involved with pure sex for sex sake. V'yesh omrim shelo nishlo sa chatasim, and they say something different. That the measure of their guilt was only complete al b'chet shel chamas, that they became very, very violent. Shehoya chumsim zeh, they were robbing each other. They were killing each other. Can you imagine? And I said this before, so I'm not going to go into it again. Shehoya roim l'shemayim v'lebrios, they were sinning not just against heaven, which says that we have to reproduce, but they were also sinning against their fellow man. So then he says like this, going over here, Yesh lamala shenismano al kola shel elo shemoisrim, there is a special angel, which means a channel that goes upwards, carries these words, these voices, these sounds of those people that shemosrim din al chavrechem al chachama she'asalahem. So it's like taking out, it's like the Sicilians, like if somebody did something bad to you, you kill them. So that's a vendetta. If you have to kill him, you kill his family, you kill everybody, so everybody knows who you are. So this is a case of Mosim Din al Chavrechem. They ratted out their friends, Alachama Shenasa Lahem, because somebody did something bad to them. Ratzon Alomar. Now I have to explain this a little bit. Amar Chazal, the rabbis say, there's a quote from the Gemara in Baba Kama. Kalam Moser Din al Chavera, anybody who turns his friend in, Huna Enish Techilo. You say something bad. This could be just Lashon Hara about your friend. Something that should happen to him, like he should be, God forbid, that he should be killed, something like that, happens to you first. That they both wind up being punished. So also here we see that the Gazlonim, that is Nigzalim, that the people who are robbed and who are beaten up, he said they get punished too, but also the people that robbed them are also punished, the fee shelo dana lamata. And the reason why, there were no courts. Now we have a problem here with the courts now in the United States, that some of them are so liberal, so giving, that they don't punish the wicked. So then what happens? Sheim koyudanim lamata, because if there were courts set up, and they would be able to judge these people who are really doing bad things, and they're judged down below, lo hoya nidonim lamala, then there wouldn't be any reason for the Kodesh Baruch Hu to come along and bring a plague. Va'alda, and this is written mifnei hagezel v'shvil tza'achas umasiris din l'shemayim. So because of the gezel, the robbery that was going on, armed robbery, murder that went along with it, and because of the screams and the din that was placed now on Shemayim, because of the violence, because of the robbery, like the rabbis say, that their din was only sealed Ella ala gezel, because of the robbery and the violence that came with it. So we see this is different ideas from the Zohar, but the Zohar is pointing right at this time in which we live right now. It's just that we always have to, I guess it's a struggle. You always have to try to make the din legitimate, have courts down here below, and a person has to protect their bris, because non-protection of the bris